Hello, good evening. This is Business Live. Coming up, cedi stability impacts on April inflation numbers as general prices of imported items drop. Ahead, we will engage the Association of Ghana Industries on what this means.
Taxes, monetary policy rate, and what is going to happen on the foreign exchange market only influence our consumer price index and rate of inflation indirectly.
Also in this bulletin, some banks risk collapsing if the $1.5 billion Financial Stability Fund is not made available by July. That is a warning from an economist at Louisiana Economic Development in the USA, Dr. Sahad Idrisu.
The government is not able to get that 1.5 billion stability fund set up by the July deadline not the deadline, by the July that is saying. We should expect that some of these banks will start collapsing.
Plus, Institute of Economic Affairs calls for the establishment of an independent parliamentary budget office to monitor the implementation of Ghana's monetary and fiscal policies.
We are calling for the establishment of an independent parliamentary budget office. That's what is normally called a fiscal council.
We have details of these plus many more shortly. I am Pious Baka to our very first story. The cedi stability against the US dollar continues to impact positively on other sectors of the economy. Data from the Ghana Statistical Service on inflation for April 2023 shows that the general price levels for imported items witnessed some significant drop to hit 43.1%. George Yafe has the rest of the story.
Ghana Statistical Service data showed that from March to April this year, imported inflation dropped by almost 9%, a move that has been described by some analysts as a record development. It is also believed that the cedi's performance had played an important role in helping inflation rate for April 2023 decline to 41.2%. This is because some of these importers didn't require a lot more Ghana cedis to import the same value of items. This meant that they didn't pass on those costs to consumers in the form of higher prices. Others want us to believe that the global inflation numbers are also declining. So it's not really about the Ghana cedi stability. But for some, the biggest concern here is that can the stability be linked to positive developments in the economy or described as an artificial one?
We feel that there is a lot that we have to do at the real sector perspective to complement whatever the central bank is doing to ensure that we bring down inflation. So it's our expectation that conversations would ensue around why consistently in the last 3 months we are seeing the Western North region recording the highest food inflation, why we're going to ask questions that in the last 7 months the Volta region has recorded the least food inflation. This is the conversation that should happen in order to help us better predict the indirect effect that we are only hypothesizing that it would affect inflation.
Again, will inflation rate continue dropping as the Bank of Ghana is even projecting that it will get below 29% by the end of this year? Also, when are we going to see these positive macroeconomic developments impact on consumers when it comes to price reductions in the area of transport fares and prices of some commodities on the market?
We shall get back to that story later, but let's do this quickly. And the managing director of GCB Bank, John Kofi Adumakun, is asking the Bank of Ghana to take a relook at its monetary policy rate if it wants banks to reduce interest on lending rates. This comes after calls from the second deputy governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Elsie Ado-Awaji, to commercial banks to reduce cost of borrowing by businesses due to a consistent drop in inflation to 41.2% in April. Now, according to Mr. Adumakun, the drivers of the lending rate currently do not call for reduction. He spoke to Joy Business at the Ghana Employers Association Annual Leadership Conference. The following report has more.
This year's annual leadership conference was to deliberate on issues pertaining to women in leadership and specifically on policies that support the work done by various stakeholders in narrowing the gender gap at the apex of leadership. Speaking to Joy Business at the event, Managing Director at GCB Bank, John Kofi Adumakun, said banks are willing to collaborate with government in supporting businesses.
Well, lending rates, banks' lending rates depend on a number of things. Okay, and those drivers of the lending rates are very clear. Okay, so if interest rates generally come down, banks will have no choice than to reduce interest rates. Interest rates are currently high, okay, and that's why lending rates are high. Okay, so the Bank of Ghana, through monetary policy, will try and manage all of this interest rates, as you say, to bring down inflation. So next MPC meeting comes up in a few days. Let's see how things go. But banks do not just bring interest rates down or take interest rates up. It's a measure of the temperature in the economy, and that's how it works.
On this part, Chief Executive Officer for the Ghana Employers Association, Alex Frempong, called for the need to advance gender parity in the corporate space of Ghana by convening leaders from diverse backgrounds to deliberate and act on the real opportunities available for women and underlining challenges that ought to be surmounted.
I think the association has been running a women's empowerment program since 2019. And in the process, we have been able to enroll a good number of women, and on their return to their various organizations, they are showing signs of progress, they are showing signs of competence, and they are showing signs that, given the opportunity, they can break the glass ceiling and assume position of responsibility at the highest level in their various organizations. So we decided last year to bring all of them together to share their experiences, to touch base with each other, and look at how collectively they can improve upon their capacity to, as women, make differences in the organization by aspiring to take the leadership mantle.
During this year's program, cohort 3 and 4 of 83 participants of the Female Future program in Ghana graduated and were inducted into the alumni network. This year's conference was under the theme, Powering the Future with Balanced Participation in Decision Making.
All right, so let's go back to our earlier story where we were talking about the April inflation-related story, and we are joined via Zoom by the president of the Association of Ghana Industries, Humphrey Enyimdake, for his perspective on the current inflation rate and, of course, development, and as calls for decrease in policy rate by the Bank of Ghana by some industry players. Grateful, Humphrey, you could join me on Business Live. Now, what do you make of the consistent decline in inflation over the past 4 months now? Unmute for me, Humphrey.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, as stated, it's a positive trend to come to the realization that inflation has peaked and is dropping consistently over the last 4 months. That is a positive news. However, as questioned, policy tools. Well, per the mandate of BOG, that is the role they need to play deploying the various monetary policy tools to tame inflation. The extent and the degree of success over the period is what we need to question. The impact over the period of inflation on our various businesses, on our disposable incomes, has been the concern that most players in the space, in the business space, have raised concerns about. So it's a positive trend to see inflation decline over the period. As to whether the efficiency and efficacy of the monetary policy tools, we can debate and engage in discussions on that set.
We'll come to that pretty soon. But in terms of industry inflation, of what we know to be producer price inflation, are you also witnessing some significant price reduction from your end?
Well, it's still early days yet to accept a drastic price reduction in the various products we produce. Bearing in mind the producer price index, the PPI, that the statistician uses as his basis to determine the consumer price index, is still high on various fronts. Various variables goes into pricing, and therefore, if in recent times taxes and policy taxes are still slapped on businesses, and we just started implementing same of taxes from May, these are yet to be passed through the various products. So it's still early days here to witness drastic drop in prices of various products.
Early days, you said. But with regards to the policy rate, there are indications that the Bank of Ghana may want to hike the rate a little bit, despite the reduction in inflation. Are you worried?
So that goes back to confirm my earlier position that it's still early days yet for prices of products to be reduced. If the Monetary Policy Committee is still anticipating increase in policy rates, it goes to confirm that the fundamentals are still weak. We are not yet out of the woods, even though we have peaked with the inflationary rates and it's trending downwards. The fundamentals still need to be corrected over the period. The impact of the various disruptions and crises were so significant, and I don't believe 4 months into the period is significant enough to correct those significant disruptions that happened. So we need a bit of time to see things corrected.
I guess the Bank of Ghana's appeal to commercial banks to start reducing their cost of interest rates due to the declining inflation is really not justified then.
Well, I mean, there are various determinants of the pricing of the lending rates. However, if we believe T-bills, that's one of the determinants, seems to be trending downwards, would one suggest that that is sufficient, irrespective of the reference rate and that of the inflationary rates and the policy rates that it seems to say that the Bank of Ghana wants to adjust upwards. So it still suggests to you that the fundamentals are still weak, irrespective of the cry of the BOG to see commercial banks reduce their lending rates. There are factors, there are formulas to determine that. And if the formulas are not, the puzzle is not correct, that may not be the reality, even though they might use the moral suasion argument to ask the banks to reduce their interest rates.
I guess it wouldn't become a surprise to you if the Bank of Ghana should go ahead to increase the policy rate then.
Yes, it will not, because like I stated earlier, the supply disruptions that happened, we did argue out our strong case that the cost push factors that really were one of the significant elements in the variables are now being corrected. Beyond the Ukraine war, Ukraine-Russia war, we did have the domestic supply constraints. We did have the financial crisis, the debt position of the country. These are all elements that went into the supply constraints. And in recent times, you had the Ghana ports and harbors making statements about the number of vessels coming in. It all goes to indicate to you that the supply constraints are not perfectly corrected yet. We need time to correct it. Our farm gates in terms of raw material supplies are still challenging. Policy reforms, policy interventions need time to correct these broken and weakened joints. So it's still early yet, yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Humphrey, for your time here on Business Live. He is the president of the Association of Ghana Industries speaking to us there. You're still watching Business Live with me, Pious Kojopaka. Still to come, some banks risk collapsing if the $1.5 billion Financial Stability Fund is not made available by July. That is a warning from an economist, Dr. Sahad Idrisu.
$1 billion stability fund set up by the July deadline that is, not the deadline, but the July that is saying, we should expect that some of these banks will start collapsing.
Hello again, I am Pious Kojopaka. To some other stories, there could be a looming banking crisis to hit Ghana again. This is a warning coming from an economist at Louisiana Economic Development in the USA, Dr. Sahad Idrisu. According to him, if the government is not able to get the $1.5 billion stability fund by July this year, some banks may collapse since they won't be able to pay their workers and keep the operations running. He argues that already some banks have recorded huge losses in their financial statements. Dr. Sahad Idrisu spoke earlier on the AM show on this channel.
Of course, we are in the midst of crisis, but the government is suppressing the crisis. And then with every crisis, no matter how you suppress it, it will get to a point you cannot suppress it any longer. It's just the same way government was telling that we are not going to IMF, we are not going to IMF, we won't go to IMF, because government was trying to suppress the crisis. But it got to a point that the crisis can no longer be contained. So government had to finally go to IMF. That is the same thing happening within the banking crisis, the banking sector. If government is not able to get that 1.5 billion stability fund set up by the July deadline that is, not the deadline, but the July that is saying, we should expect that some of these banks will start collapsing. They will start laying their workers off because they wouldn't be able to keep paying the salaries of these workers without getting the investment that they did in those bonds. You understand? So the financial stability fund is a way of cushioning the bank. Okay, whatever losses that you had made, probably even if you cannot recover all of it back, but at least you can get some back. So for example, maybe GCB is losing about $50 billion, even if they can't get it back, but at least the government is able to come in through the fund and they could even access 40 billion, it will go back into working capital. So if there's nothing for them to rely on, what do you expect to happen?
Reacting to this development, banking consultant Dr. Richmond Etuahini urged the Bank of Ghana to the government, to engage mining and telecom firms to help mobilize revenue to salvage the imminent danger.
We can generate the mining companies. Let me give you a simple example. We can go and renegotiate with the mining companies and even some of the telecos. I don't want to mention their names. They are cash cow. We call it cash cow. They are foreign currency cash cow. We can go and sit down with them and tell them that if the contract was even 70-30, we would like you to do it, say 60-40 for us. Give us 10% of your money to enable us to shore up this funding. We can't do it. We can't do it. You see, we need to think through when the challenges come. It shouldn't be sacrosanct to few people who think they know all. Let us go back to the mining company. We have an existing contract with them. The contract maybe is 80-20. Let us ask them, ladies and gentlemen, we are in crisis. We want us to help us, lend us some money, and you will structure your repayment through your mining proceeds. I don't think they'll be too hard on us.
On to one of our headline stories, and the Institute of Economic Affairs is calling for the establishment of an independent parliamentary budget office to monitor Ghana's monetary and fiscal systems. This, the Institute says, will ensure a stricter monetary and fiscal management system to transform the economy. Addressing a group of civil society organizations, Director of Research Dr. John Kwache said a parliamentary budget office is necessary in assessing and estimating the cost of government projects and programs.
We are calling for the establishment of an independent parliamentary budget office. That's what is normally called a fiscal council. Okay? Now, in the US, they have a congressional budget office. In the UK, they have Office of Budget Responsibility. And others have fiscal councils. Now, the idea of a parliamentary budget office is that it is manned by independent professionals. They are not appointed by the president, and they work with Parliament. They assist Parliament in carrying out its oversight role over the budget. We want one, set up in Parliament in Ghana. They should be independent professionals appointed by the Public Services Commission, not the president. The president, we had established 2018 Fiscal Policy Advisory Council. It was appointed by him, and they work under him, and they are paid by him. We don't want that. Since they were formed, we haven't even heard about them. They are working in secrecy. We don't want. That's not the kind of fiscal council or parliamentary budget office that we are asking for. These are some of the functions that they will be undertaking. Quite a government independent evaluation of government budgets, making forecasts, monitoring implementation of the budget, carrying out independent estimates of the cost of government projects, especially this. You see, we are in this country where, there's always the argument between the ruling party and the opposition that you constructed this interchange at an exorbitant price, or maybe an airport or something, and then you never get the truth. If we had the Parliamentary Budget Office, they will come out with their estimates of the cost of the government projects and give it to Parliament, make it available to Parliament.
Now, the Social Security and National Insurance Trust, SNIT, has rolled out the self-employed enrollment drive to provide pensions and related benefits to self-employed workers in the informal sector. It is in line with the Trust's mandate to extend pension coverage to all workers, especially the self-employed. Director General John Ofori-Tinkran says in the past 9 months, the number of self-employed persons enrolled on the Trust has doubled.
Only 1.9 million of the 10 million workers in the country are covered under the SNIT scheme. Only 32,000 persons, representing just 1.68% of active contributors, are self-employed, despite the fact that the majority of workers in the country are in the informal sector. Director General of SNIT, John Ofori-Tinkran, says there is a need for the Trust to embark on aggressive marketing to attract the informal sector to sign up. He was speaking at the launch of the Self-Employment Enrollment Drive in Kumasi.
These self-employed persons, the law does not make it mandatory for them to join. So they have to, if they are going to come and join us, it will be because they've seen and heard what is in it for them, and that is why they will come to us. So the first thing we've done is to go out on an aggressive marketing campaign to explain exactly what it is that we do, which are the 4 things that I told you about, that we will replace your salary when you achieve the ripe old age of 60. Or if God were to call you early, or God to pension you early, we will pay you a survivor's benefit to the people who you leave behind. Or if God forbid, for some reason you become permanently invalid and unable to work, we will pay you until death. And then the last thing being that if you are a member in good standing and you go and enroll, you go for health insurance renewal, you don't have to pay anything.
The Trust has measures in place to ensure prompt and easy payment of contributions. General Secretary of the Christian Council, Reverend Dr. Kwabena Opuni-Frimpong, believes this will wane off the mistrust and less confidence in the SNIT scheme.
But years ago, the impression people had with SNIT, one was that it was for government staff, employees, and then also I don't think people had much confidence in SNIT. The public confidence in SNIT was not the best. They were in the news for some bad stories, sometimes corruption here and there. And there are those also who feel that you go there and the attitude towards work and other things. And in fact, even when we started this recent, restructuring or whatever, there were people who were afraid and scared about what would that mean for pensioners. But what has happened today, statements from the Director General and the board chair, and the approach they have taken going down to people, the non-formal sector, if you like, and the assurances we are having, attitude towards work, that you don't even need to run to their offices, you can reach out to them on mobile phone. It seems to me they've opened a new page, and Ghanaians must get ready to accept that. They must keep their word, and government must support them. The things people are afraid of, as they give the assurance, must be exactly so.
Mona Lisa Frimpong reporting.
Always a joy coming your way with Business Life. I am Pious Kojobaka. You can always get business stories when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. We leave you with some international business.